Women's Rights National Historical Park in Seneca Falls, New York, commemorates the people and places central to the 1848 Women's Rights Convention, the first event of its kind in American history. Located at the northern end of the Finger Lakes region of central New York State, Seneca Falls would become an unexpected crossroads for several major movements, events, and historical figures. In the early 1800s, the United States was expanding westward with the construction of railroads and the Erie Canal. While many of the people spreading into western New York were devoutly religious, this separation from major population centers meant sanctioned members of the clergy were hard to come by. Local religious leaders often introduced less dogmatic and more controversial tenets into their churches. One of these groups that gained a lot of traction were the Quakers. One of the inciting figures for the 1848 convention was Lucretia Mott, a prominent Quaker leader from Philadelphia. In 1840, a World Anti-Slavery Convention was held in London. Here Mott would meet fellow convention delegate Elizabeth Cady Stanton. While attempting to advocate for the rights of the enslaved, women delegates were told to remain silent. This indignity would stay with both women. A few years later, in 1847, Stanton relocated with her husband from Boston to Seneca Falls. When Mott visited the region in 1848 to fight for the rights of prisoners, Native Americans, and others, a tea party was arranged with a handful of Quakers and abolitionists, including her sister, Martha Coffin Wright. While Stanton herself was not a Quaker, she attended this tea party at the house of Richard and Jane Hunt, where the women committed themselves to finally advocating for their own rights. A few days later, at the home of Thomas and Mary Ann McClintock, they drafted the Declaration of Sentiments, a document based on the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Sentiments asserted that all men and women are created equal. Notices were run in area newspapers, including the North Star, a publication in Rochester operated by Frederick Douglass. As a known advocate for many social causes, Douglass was invited to attend the Women's Rights Convention, which he accepted. Over the course of 2 days, 300 people attended this convention. Speeches were given and grievances were raised. Of those grievances, the most famous would be for the right to vote, although it was not the focal point of the convention. Grievances that were more focused upon include the right for women to keep their own wages, own property, divorce, attend college, and many other rights. At the end of the convention, 100 women and men signed the Declaration of Sentiments. It was 72 years between the Declaration of Independence and the Declaration of Sentiments, and it would be another 72 years before women were guaranteed the right to vote by the 19th Amendment. The Seneca Falls Convention was the spark that ignited the women's rights movement. Today, the park protects the homes of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Richard and Jane Hunt, and Thomas and Mary Ann McClintock, as well as the Wesleyan Methodist Chapel where the convention was held. A visitor center and museum stands beside the chapel in downtown Seneca Falls. In the years following the convention, Seneca Falls would play a larger part in the women's rights movement. Here, Stanton would be introduced to her lifelong collaborator, Susan B. Anthony. Amelia Bloomer would popularize the idea of women wearing more comfortable clothing, and Alice Paul would introduce the Equal Rights Amendment, which as of this recording has still not been ratified.